A flurry of diplomatic activity continues in an effort to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East. President Biden has spoken with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by phone to discuss ways to advance a ceasefire and hostage release deal.
The White House said Mr. Biden stressed to Mr. Netanyahu the urgency of closing a deal. The two leaders also discussed the removal of remaining obstacles in the upcoming talks in Cairo. An agreement to end 10 months of violence in the region remains elusive, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrapping up his Middle East trip yesterday without securing a concrete truce deal.
For more, we speak now with Dr. Anas Iqtait, lecturer at the Australian National University Centre for Arab and Islamic Studies. Dr. Anas, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, I want to start by asking you about Antony Blinken. No luck for him. And he sounded far less optimistic, when he left compared to when he first arrived for trip number 9 to the region. Will Joe Biden have better luck after his phone call with Netanyahu? I mean, how would you describe the status of ceasefire talks at this time as negotiators prepare for another round of talks?
I think it's important to start with the fact that negotiations is the continuation of war through diplomatic means. And this is something that Blinken and the American administration understand very well. Over the past 6 months or so, which has seen a process of negotiations between Hamas and Israel that has wielded very little success, we have seen the American administration continually evolve its position, and in most cases in favor of the Israeli position that has also been evolving. So we are seeing a situation where we are at a deadlock on 3 primary issues. The first is the presence of Israeli troops in the Philadelphia crossing, a position that Israel is fully pushing for, and the Egyptian government and the Palestinians, or i.e. Hamas in particular, are against. The second is the presence of Israeli troops in the middle of the Gaza Strip through what is known as the Netzarim juncture, which effectively cuts the Gaza Strip into a northern section and a southern section. And the third is the nature of the ceasefire that we are discussing. Is it a permanent ceasefire or is it a temporary ceasefire? Obviously, Israel is in favor of a temporary ceasefire that would allow it to re-engage militarily in the Gaza Strip. But then everybody else, including the American government actually, is in favor of more or less a permanent ceasefire that would put an end to the nightmare that we have been seeing in Gaza from a humanitarian perspective, obviously. So this is where we are. It's not likely that we will reach a breakthrough, even with the phone call by the White House to Israel. The only thing that will result in change is for the United States to truly pull its leverage on Israel and in all parties, actually, in these negotiations. And that will likely get us closer to a deal than where we are at this moment.
I want to talk about the Philadelphia corridor. Mr. Blinken has said the U.S., quote, does not accept any long-term occupation of Gaza by Israel. And that sort of sounds dismissive of Netanyahu's demand. In the minds of those in Washington, how relevant is Mr. Netanyahu at this point?
Well, Netanyahu is very relevant because Netanyahu has been the voice that has more or less shaped the United States' approach towards these negotiations. Netanyahu has been setting the wider security structure in the region. And due to Netanyahu's personal actions, actually, we are at the moment closer to any other time to a regional confrontation that will involve Iran and many other state and non-state actors. So I think Netanyahu is very relevant. He is also very popular in Israel at the moment. Most likely, if we move into elections in Israel, he will be the likely prime minister in a future government. But I think it's also important to note that Netanyahu's actions are not also, they are not fully reflective of the of wider perspectives in Israel that if view that the military objectives in Gaza have been completely achieved, or what can be achieved through military goals rather have been completely achieved, and that it's important at the moment to continue the war through diplomatic means, through negotiating with Hamas, even if that means reaching an agreement that is not fully in favor of the current Netanyahu position. So back to your question, I think Netanyahu is very relevant and the White House is still taking him quite seriously.
That said, Dr. Anas, Netanyahu, and for that matter, Yahya Sinwar are both seemingly skeptical about making peace. I want to ask if current circumstances, meaning tensions with Iran, Hezbollah, and also Sinwar's consolidation of power within Hamas, has that actually eased the pressure on both men to secure a deal quickly?
I think that where we stand at the moment hasn't changed for many months. Yes, at the Hamas side, we have a new head of the movement. But I think what we usually overlook is the fact that there is a political bureau in Hamas, and most of the political decision-making occurs in the wider political bureau and not necessarily by the man or the person in charge, i.e. Sinwar in this situation, and Ismail Haniyeh before him. On the Israeli side, we obviously have the Israeli cabinet, we have the head, the prime minister, and Netanyahu does have his leverage in the Israeli government. So that being said, I don't think we have seen significant change with regards to the leadership of the two primary stakeholders here, the Israeli prime minister and the leadership of Hamas. And therefore, I still am very pessimistic about the likelihood of reaching a ceasefire in the near future.
Okay, but Mr. Blinken says this current round of ceasefire talks may be the last opportunity for a hostage deal. Is that hyperbole, or is time truly running out for those still being held captive?
I think time is running out for everybody in the region. I think Blinken and the U.S. administration, the mediators, the wider observers who are not directly engaging in the negotiations, but they are observing the negotiations. For example, Jordan, the Lebanese government, the Saudi government as well. Everybody, including the Israeli government, understand that time is running out, not only for the release of Israeli captives in the Gaza Strip, but also for the livelihoods of millions of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip that have more or less lost all means to life. A genocide has been carried against them. A full-scale war has been targeting the full infrastructure in the Gaza Strip and made it completely unlivable. And the possibility of reaching and moving towards a wide regional escalation that nobody really knows and can predict where it will lead. Again, I'm pessimistic about finding a ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip front, and then in the wider regional front. If we continue on this path, it is highly likely that we may find ourselves at a wider regional confrontation that is really difficult to understand how it will impact the region in the long term.
All right, Dr. Anas, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Just hoping that the upcoming talks will indeed result in a breakthrough. Dr. Anas Iqtait is lecturer at the Australian National University.